Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019. You can always follow a 100% free, 24/7, boots on the ground content covering the Jaguars on social media such as Facebook and Twitter when you follow us at Jaguars on SI. All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Today we are talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, and the AFC South race. Folks, it is going to look like come down to the wire when it comes to the AFC South. Technically, if you look at by standings, three teams, quote-unquote, alive between the Jaguars, the Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts and Texans are both 8-5. The Jaguars are 9-4. Have a one-game lead over the Texans, and technically have a 1.5-game lead over the Colts. So, obviously, the Colts are in a rough spot right now. The Daniel Jones injury was really rough to see and watch. Just in terms of games I've covered live. Haven't seen a ton of non-contact injuries that just look like that, especially at that position. And obviously, you read the stuff that the Colts players said after the game and that they've said all season and that the Jags coaches and players have said. And, Daniel Jones is just a very well-liked guy, very tough football player. So, obviously, they're losing a lot at the quarterback position without Daniel Jones. Phillip Rivers apparently coming in for a visit. I would think if you're at the point where you're bringing Phillip Rivers in for a visit, that you are more or less just wanting to see what shape he's in, and you're already resigned to the fact that you would be willing to sign Phillip Rivers. So it'd be fascinating. Hasn't played in a couple years. He's very old, but I guess pinch hitter. I don't know. The Colts, if Riley Leonard is injured and misses some time, he honestly looked better than I thought he would. But if he is injured and misses some time, he will obviously, put the Colts in a spot at quarterback where they got to do something. The only other choice is Brett Rypien, but one way or another, it definitely seems like the Colts are not factoring into the AFC South race like the Jaguars and Texans. It's also the fact that out of these three teams, the Colts have by far the hardest schedule left. They play the Texans and Jaguars, still the Seahawks, and I believe the 49ers. Four teams that are playoff teams while they're going through potentially down to quarterback number 4. So the Texans, I think, when you watch them during this winning streak that they've had, the fact that they won so many games with Davis Mills at quarterback is why I think they're a dangerous team. You look at the numbers, and I know there were takes out there about Davis Mills as potential starter somewhere next year. But, you just look at the numbers and compare him and Stroud. And Mills didn't play particularly well. And Stroud, to me, at least, I test as well. I think is making a lot of plays. Obviously, their protection isn't great. Obviously, I think Nick Caley still isn't great. But, he's a heck of a player. And Nico Collins is a heck of a player as well. They have a couple other weapons. They're able to run the ball at times. So, obviously, their win over the Jaguars, several weeks ago kind of spurred this whole run of theirs. I think they're... If you look at the potential matchups for the Jaguars in the first round, it's like Buffalo, Houston, potentially Los Angeles, etc. I think Houston would be the most daunting potential one. Because I think that defense is incredibly legit. Will Anderson is a rare football player. One of the best defensive players in football already. And he's a good case and example of why, as long as, they're able to develop Travis Hunter and he becomes the, obviously player he has a ceiling for and produces, etc., and contributes, to winning, nobody will care how much they traded for him, because nobody cares how much the Texans traded for Will Anderson, because he's a fantastic player, one of the best in the game. And it's not just him, though. Danielle Hunter is obviously a force. They seemingly always are able to get some production from interior guys. Aziz Al-Shahir, I know, not the most popular person in Jacksonville, but as a football player, obviously has, really one of the better linebackers in the AFC. And then their secondary, several really, really talented guys. And obviously, I think that them and the Jaguars are a pretty even match, as we've seen. They've played in 2 close games this year. They each have a win against the other. You can argue the Jaguars have had better quarters overall against the Texans, if you want to get into semantics, but it's been 2 toss-ups as games. The Texans, out of these, 3 teams in the AFC South, the Jaguars, Texans, and Colts, have the easiest schedule by far. I mean, they played Vegas and Arizona during that span. They play a Colts team that seemingly will have either Phillip Rivers or rookie quarterback Riley Leonard against a, intense Houston pass rush and defense that just flustered, arguably the most talented football of a generation in Patrick Mahomes. So I think that ultimately, when you look at the 2 pictures that these teams are facing, over these next few weeks, the Texans, they do have an easier, schedule, an easier avenue of, frankly, winning out than the Jaguars do. I mean, the Jaguars have, out of their 4 games left, 1 against the Jets, who just looked really rough against the Miami Dolphins. The Jaguars can't afford to overlook anybody, but you would think, take care of business there. Another against the Tennessee Titans, who, good win for them against the Cleveland Browns, because, this is off topic, but I'm rooting for Cam Ward. You can just tell what a tough position he's in as a rookie quarterback, and it's good just to see, him find one. Him be able to stack one, just as a fan of the game and fan of, as young quarterbacks go. But ultimately, there isn't anything standing in the Jaguars' way of not winning at least 3 of their last 4 games, in my opinion. Because then you have another game against the Colts where, again, either Rivers or Leonard. Leonard played better against the Jaguars, I think, than probably anybody would have anticipated, externally. Myself certainly included. Some big throws on the move, on 3rd down. Definitely a lot of turnover-worthy plays, I thought. I thought the Jaguars almost, had 4 or 5 chances to intercept him. And, there'll be some games where a quarterback doesn't give a defense a single one, and I thought, the Jaguars had several against Leonard. But ultimately, the Jaguars, the game that will decide this AFC South race, seemingly, is the Denver Broncos game in 2 weeks. Unless the Texans drop one of their 4 games, which it's tough. They also play the Chargers. It's tough to think, they won't beat the Chargers. So it's tough to not think the Texans are going to have a good shot to win out. And I'm not saying the Jaguars can't beat the Denver Broncos. I've said for a couple of weeks now, I think the Jaguars can beat any team in the AFC, Houston Texans included. That's how the AFC is this year. So it does add a ton of stakes to the Denver Broncos game that I think, obviously everybody knew it was already going to be a big game and a tough game against a good opponent. They'll be having something to play for, the 1-2 seed in the AFC, etc. If the Texans win out and the Jaguars lose that game, Jaguars still probably make the playoffs, win 3 of the other 4 games. The AFC, though, South, as it is, tough spot to be in. They're control their own destiny. They're not necessarily in a tough spot to get it done because I think they can beat the Broncos. But it just shows you how slim the margin for error is for this Jaguars team as they make their push for an AFC South title.